There is one thing, however, that cannot be bought or sold, bartered or traded for. That one thing is innocence. We turn our attention to Samantha, a woman whose youth and innocence is a distant, half-remembered memory. There is, however, one memory burned into her brain so deeply that the scars of it can still be seen to this day. The memory of the day she was dared as a child to go down to the Old Swimmin Hole, a place feared by the other children on her street. And they were right to be afraid, because beneath this seemingly tranquil pond lurks something horrible, something that Samantha will relive the memory of meeting over and over again. For while innocence cannot be bought, it can be stolen, quickly and without warning.
Silence. Long bouts of nothingness that I can't stand it. You know when you're in a crowded room and everybody slowly succumbs to this quiet, comfortable silence, and then someone speaks out or they laugh. That's me. Because silence just scares the hell out of me. Sometimes at night, I'll just lay in bed with the TV's off, and there's nothing in the air except a faint hum of a power outlet. And all of a sudden, it's like the darkness just starts pushing down on me, and my chest starts to get tight, and this wave of panic just washes over me, and I shut my eyes, and I try to slow down my breathing, and I try to imagine my grandmama singing to me. And then after a while, it passes. And I start to fall asleep. But in those fleeting moments, those moments before I fall over the precipice of dreaming, I'll remember the first time I feared death. When I was a girl, I grew up on this long, shadowless road. I mean, in the heat of the summer, it felt like the very asphalt was going to melt under our bare feet when we played hopscotch. As though the tar itself threatened to bubble up and catch us whole and take us down into its sweltering embrace. The bad could be solved with a quick spray of hose. We were just children then. I mean, slip and slide and imaginary lightsabers were the order of the day. And we all dreamed of a place we could go to cool off during the blazing heat of the summer. And we would gossip ferociously about any kids lucky enough to go to a water park on their summer vacation. The sun just beat down on the rest of us like some vengeful god. It was after I turned 7 that I first heard about the swimming hole. Up till then, I thought it was nothing more than a fenced-off retention pond at the end of the road, nothing more. I mean, I glanced at it on my way home from playing down the street, but I never paid it no mind. I remember I was coming home from school one day, and I saw this girl, Jackie, playing in the yard. She was a few years older than me, and I looked up to her the way that younger kids often do. She was digging a hole in the dirt looking for worms, and her fancy dress had brown on the edges. And I remember when I walked up to her, I was dragging my hand along the chain link fence that went around the property, and I could hear a song she was singing to herself, and it was 1, 2, 3, and 4. You won't be coming around here no more. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Go near the water, you'll end up bait. 9, 10, 11, and 12. Hey, what rhymes with 12? I was always a bit of a smart ass. She came over the fence to see me. Well, I don't know No, I've never been that fond of rhyme before. I glanced over to the sandbox kingdom she had dug for herself. Well, what are you rhyming about? And then she looked away from me. And she said, swimming hole. Mama says I ain't never supposed to go down there. Says the devil himself lives in that water. Says all kinds of unspeakable things go on down there. And then she looked at me and her eyes narrowed. Mama also said, I'm not supposed to talk to you. Says your grandmama's a witch. And she makes cow's milk sour in the udders and black cat's kittens die in the womb. I tried to reach my hands through that fence to strangle that girl, but she jumped back before I could take hold. You take that back. Because that's what Jesus told Mama. And with that, she ran back to her little sandbox as her mama came home from the porch. Jackie, supper! Then she turned her eyes on me. She said, you, scat. Before I called a preacher on you and that witch granny of yours. I cried all the way home. My grandmother found me in the yard, just bawling my eyes out. Samantha, why you cry? Get in the house, supper is cooking. My grandmother's voice had the power of Christopher Lee and the accent of Bela Lugosi. And it normally scared the shit out of me. But at that moment, well, it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. And I jumped up out of the grass and I ran over to her and I threw my arms around her and I just said, Grandma. And she told me to stop crying and to go upstairs and get ready for supper. And that's what I did, because I always did what she told me to do. And then that night, after a mainly quiet supper, she looked at me and she said, so, Dragan, how was school today? What did you learn? I glanced up at her and then back down to my plate. School was never my strong suit. Well, arithmetic and spelling and stuff. My grandmother cursed to herself in Hungarian. Why I send you to the school if you don't learn anything? Please, Dragan, tell me you learned something today. I had to come up with something, you know. I didn't want to disappoint her. So I looked at her and I said, well, Jackie says that the devil himself lives in the swimming hole down the end of the road. And then I saw my grandmother's face turn the palest shade of white I'd ever seen. And she got this look in her eyes that scared me, and I folded my hands on my lap, and I kind of leaned away, fearing I was going to get hit. She's from the old country, and that was her way. But she didn't hit me. Dragan, you promise me now you never ever go near that swimming hole. You swear it to me right now. I tried to argue with her, but she cut me off. No, you swear it to me right now. So I swore. I swore. And then that night when she was taking me in, well, I had to find out. So I said to her, I said, Grandma, what is in that swimming hole? I didn't think she was going to answer me, but after a while, she sat down on the bed and she looked at me and she said, it's a baba. She said the word like she thought it was going to mean something to me, but it didn't. What's that, Grandma? It's like a fish, you know, a fish. Like the kind in Snow White? Because I really wanted to understand what she was saying to me, you know. No, this one much worse. This one much more danger. This one, she changed how she look all the time. This one, she live in water, in fountains. She called the children to come to the water. But why would she do that, Grandma? And then my grandmother got this sad look on her face. And she said, to eat them, dragon. She wants to eat the children. I didn't sleep much that night. Sure you understand why. She had managed to put the fear of God in me. By the next morning, I guess she figured out I was still afraid because she called me into a room. And when I got there, she had something in her hand, but I couldn't see what it was. Here, I want you to have this. And then she opened her hand, and it was the most beautiful brooch I had ever seen. It looked like bunches of spring flowers just shining in the light. You keep this with you, and it's going to help keep you safe. I took the brooch, and I put it on my dress, and I stood there admiring myself in the mirror. I had no idea how a piece of jewelry was ever going to keep me safe, but it didn't matter. Just seeing my grandmother's brooch over my heart made me feel better. And right then and there, I promised myself, I said, I will do exactly what my grandmother told me to do, and I will never go near that swimming hole. And like most promises made by 7-year-olds, it was eventually broken, but not for that year. For that year, I did exactly what my grandmother told me to do, and I did not go near that swimming hole. Now, I would hear kids talking about the swimming hole at school, but I never paid it no mind. And then it started to happen after I turned 8. I found myself being taunted in the play yard by a circle of kids. And they were singing that song I'd heard before. 1, 2, 3, and 4 won't be coming around here no more. Jackie was their leader. She had told everyone that my grandmother was a witch from the old country and that all the unspeakable things that were going on in that swimming hole were her fault. And then one day they came to me with the dare. You know the dare. The one that said, either I face my fears of the swimming hole or I deal with the consequences. And the consequences at the time would have been being ostracized by the kids in my school. So my choice was humiliation and loneliness or certain death. I was 8. I chose certain death because it seemed like the informed decision at the time. So with that, I turned around and I started walking down that road to the swimming hole on my way to breaking my promise to my grandmother. Large group of kids were following behind, but the further down the road we got, one by one, they started splitting off to go to the safety of their houses. Curfew! Mama's gonna kill me! Supper! I heard all the excuses as I walked. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have hightailed it out of there myself. Come up with any excuse that crossed my mind. But I didn't. I didn't because I was trying to convince myself that this was all some big misunderstanding, some old wives' tale that somebody had heard and misunderstood. Besides, I couldn't let Jackie see how scared I was, and I was well and truly scared. By the time we got to the fence that protected us from the swimming hole, there was only 5 of us. There was me and Jackie and 3 of her friends. Okay, you little witch, prove us wrong. I still wanted to strangle that girl, but I didn't. But I looked at her as defiantly as I could. I said, I will. And then I looked through the fence down at the swimming hole. It sat at the bottom of a grassy hill with large twisted trees forming a dark backdrop. Their branches bent like bony fingers reaching out to me. In the shade created by these trees, the water of black glass. For a moment, I thought it looked like some pop-up book. And then I climbed over the fence. And I started to make my way down the hill, being careful not to slide. As I got closer to the water, I could hear the crickets singing in the bushes. And when I got to the water, I stopped. The deal was walk into the water up to my knees and then count to 10. And then I could run out of there with my pride intact. I looked back up at the fence one more time. I was surprised to see that Jackie and her friends weren't up there. And for a moment, I thought maybe they'd gotten scared. Maybe they ran away. Maybe I didn't have to do this after all. And then I heard a giggle come from one of the bushes behind me. And I realized I had to do it. And I had to look brave. So I slipped off my shoes and I dipped one foot into the cool black water and then the other foot. And the bottom of the swimming hole felt like velvet on my feet. And I started to walk, one foot in front of the other, until I felt the water hit my knees. And then I stopped. And I started to count. 1, 2, 3. But the feel of the cool water on my knees, soaking into the hem of my dress, and the warmth of the sun on my face and on my arms, it all started to feel wonderful. And I started to think, why have I been so afraid of this place all this time? Maybe I should go home and tell my grandmother what it was really like so she wouldn't be afraid of it anymore. And as I stood there thinking about what I was going to do, I noticed how quiet it had suddenly become. The crickets and the cicadas that just a short while earlier had been creating this warm background hum was silent. And all I could hear was my heart beating. And as I stood there listening to nothing, I failed to notice this black, slimy tentacle that was slowly inching its way around my ankle, until it pulled tight and I screamed out of shock and out of pain, because where it had me, it felt like my skin was on fire, but that didn't make sense because my skin was under the water. And then in one swift motion, it pulled my legs out from under me and I fell backwards, and it started to drag me into the center of the swimming hole. I tried to fight it, but the more I fought it, the tighter it hung on to me, and the pain just got worse. And the next thing I knew, my head was under the water and my nostrils started to fill up with this dark liquid that this creature was emanating, and I could feel myself being taken down further and further and further. And I opened my eyes and all I could see was blackness. And I looked up and I saw this small circle of light, and I'd only been taken down a few seconds earlier, but that light looked like it was a mile away, and it was getting farther and farther and farther away from me. And I was running out of air. And then I remember thinking how quiet everything was. How peaceful everything was. And I thought of my grandmother. And I said, I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me, Grandma? Is this how I'm supposed to die? And then I remember my grandmother's brooch, and I felt on my dress until I could find it. I ripped it off my dress and I hung on to it as hard as I could, and I took that pin and I just stabbed it into the flesh of that creature that was trying to kill me. And all of a sudden there was a shriek. It wasn't human, it wasn't animal, but it just filled my head, and it let go of me, and I swam as hard as I could up to the surface. My lungs were on fire, And all of a sudden I broke through and I could breathe air again. The next thing I remember, I was laying on the grass next to the swimming hole. And then with the last bit of strength I had, I just dragged myself over to that hill and I just collapsed. I was so exhausted and I was breathing and it felt so good to breathe. And then I started to laugh. I was laughing because I'd gotten away. I was going to be okay. And I was just laying there laughing and breathing. And then I just started to hear a faint scratching sound coming up behind me. And the sound of things breaking the water. And the sound of mud being dragged through the grass. And I froze. And I turned my head ever so slowly. And all I could think was, please, don't let there be anything there. Please, don't let there be anything there. But there was. Small skeletal creatures had started to climb out of the muck and the mire. And they were dragging themselves towards me, dragging themselves on rotted hands. Their faces nothing more than skulls, their eye sockets just black and empty, their jaws hanging on sinewy hinges. And then a cold chill ran down my spine when I realized these were children. Their clothes were just rags and torn, and as they drew closer, I could smell the rot and the decay, and I turned and I tried so much to climb up that hill, and all I was doing was pulling out tufts of grass, and without warning, two more of those black tentacles shot up out of the swimming hole and started slithering over to me like two snakes. And I looked up at the fence, and I screamed when they got a hold of me again, and this time the pain was just so much worse. And I could feel dozens of bony fingers just crawling up my legs and my sides and my arms and pulling my arms back and pinning them there. And then all of a sudden I could just feel myself being dragged back down the hill. And I couldn't do anything. I wanted to fight, I really did. But I was so tired. And all I could do was cry. And that's when I heard a voice, stern and commanding, yell out an order in Hungarian. And this thing that was in the water behind me seemed to answer. And then my grandmother repeated her command again, but this time slowly and fiercely. And that thing replied again, but this time it ended in this combative hiss. And all of a sudden, everything that I felt holding me just vanished. And I rolled over on my back, and I was coughing, and I opened my eyes, and I looked up, and there was my grandmother. And she was looking down at me, and her face was furious, but her eyes were filled with tears. And I don't know how, but somehow she picked me up, and she carried me home. And she ran me a bath. And she tended to my wounds as best she could. And then she tucked me into bed, and she just stood there, staring out the window. After a while, I asked her, I said, Grandma, how did you know? Shh. Time to go to sleep, now, dragon. Time to go to sleep. Oh no, I can't go to sleep, Grandma. What if it comes back for me? I can't go to sleep, never. I can't go to sleep. Shh. Go to sleep. In this world, there are things that even monsters fear. And before I could say anything else, she started stroking my hair. And she started singing to me. And I could feel myself starting to fall asleep. No one ever gossiped about the swimming hole after that day. It was almost as though there never was a legend around it to start with. Jackie never teased me again. Of course, Jackie never spoke to me again either. No one did. But every now and then I'd catch someone looking at me with, you know, that look. That look. My grandmother and I never talked about that day again either. It was as though it was just a dream. Like everyone just wanted it to be a dream, but it wasn't a dream. I knew it wasn't a dream. Because I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, and my grandmother would come running into the room, and she would calm me down, and she would sing to me until I'd fall asleep. Even now, sometimes I'll dream that it's come back for me. It's come back, but now it's really mad because I got away the last time. And now there's nobody with me. There's nobody to help me. What am I going to do? And then I wake up, and my heart is just pounding in my chest, and I'm covered in sweat. And I come out here, and I just sit, and I wait, and I stare into the darkness. And all I can think is, please don't let there be anything there. Please don't let there be anything there. Shh. Hush. Little baby, don't say a word. It's gonna buy you a mockingbird. That mockingbird don't